First of all, congratulations on this. It's a very interesting format. The way you guys created this project. What was the decision, or how was the decision reached to have authors come and talk about themselves, but also read a short story they wrote?
So the series really started with me and one of the authors. I'm friends with a number of them, but one of them in particular, the one with the eye patch, whose name is Laird. I don't think you've seen this episode yet, but I've known him for a long time. I knew he had a really interesting life, and I love his work, and I know he had thought sort of deeply about the process of writing. Um, and then he got very sick and almost died. He survived, and I thought, oh, I should get Laird in front of a camera and make him tell me his life story and all these things before, in case he gets sick again. So we started with Laird's episode, and almost I can't remember the exact thought process, but I was like, okay, so he's going to do this interview. Let's have him read a story as well, and then maybe we can intercut between the two and see how that works, see what interesting ideas come from that. So we shot that episode first, and it worked so well that I was like, oh, let's do more of these. Authors are really interesting to talk to, whether they've had crazy lives or not. They tend to be thoughtful people and have interesting stories to tell. So yeah, it really sort of all evolved from there. Like that first one just worked, and I was like, hey, let's let's do more of this.
That's awesome because we get a lot of these documentaries or interview type projects, but this captures your attention because it brings a whole different element to it. Did you throughout the process when you were talking to these authors, did you start finding similarities between the way their process of is?
Yeah, so I would ask them all some like questions about their biography that were specific to them. But then a certain part of the interview, which you can probably detect when you watch it, knowing this, is that I would ask them the same question, each of them the same question. And one of those questions was about, or a lot number of them were about process. Like how where does the story come from? Do you have writing rituals? Like how do you,
Mhm.
when you sit down to write, what do you do? So where they get their ideas, that tends to, I mean, authors hate that question, first of all, but you
Mhm.
almost have to ask it. So they all had different answers to that question. But in terms of how they do what they do, there are similarities. None of them, I was sort of surprised by this. None of them said that they have writing rituals. All of them said basically, no, I can't. It's not like I light a candle and I wait for the muse to come inspire me. I don't like, have a special carpet or a special hat or whatever. No, like all that's, I mean, pardon my words, all that's bullshit. Like
Mhm.
if you're gonna write, you sit down and you write. Like maybe you have a set time when you sit down to do it. Like Stephen King is like every morning he does it for a certain number of hours, but there's no magic formula. There's no ritual. It's just you're just gonna do it. And I think that was interesting. I mean, one of them said that she sort of used to have rituals, but she had to get rid of them because life. There's so much that goes on in every day of life that you can't be beholden to rituals. You have to just sit down and do it.
Mhm.
So that's pretty interesting and a little bit surprising. But on other topics, like they were pretty dumbing. Some of them were like, oh yeah, I would ask one question I asked all of them was, are you in control of your characters, or do they control their story? And the answers to that were pretty varied. I mean, some of them were like, no, I'm always in control of my characters. And if you think you're not in control of your characters, you're lying to yourself. And some of them were like, no, the character goes on the page and I can't get them to do anything they don't want to do. Once they're there, they will tell me. So it was really interesting.
You being a writer and having a friendship with some of these writers, do you get like personally involved when they're telling their story? Do you feel affected by what they're sharing with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it affected as they're telling me in the like
Mhm.
actual moments of the interview. But then honestly, watching the interviews back, I still get affected by certain things they say. I mean, I just think it's one of my favorite things about the series, and one of the creative impetuses behind it is to encourage that kind of empathy with another person. Like this is a person who has lived this life. They're an artist. They create these things, and it's just an important skill to have, or like important like thing to feel, this about this sort of connection with the person who is telling you these stories. So absolutely, I still find them all very moving, and I'm friends with all of them at this point. So it's it was just nice to sit down and be like, okay, tell me, like, tell me about your life, tell me about these things that happened to you. Yeah, it was great.
Having gone through this process already, would you be willing to, take the same process and put yourself in front of the camera and try to be as vulnerable as these authors have been?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I will say this. I don't think I have anything as interesting to say on the topic of my own life as all of any of them do. And I would do it. Yeah, I would do it, I think. But I don't have, I mean, I'm not gonna, I don't have stories like Elizabeth Hand has. I don't have stories. I didn't grow up rough in West Texas like Steven. So my stories would be very much like, yep, I grew up in small town Wisconsin. It was cold during the winter. Like there's not a lot. I don't think there's a lot there, but maybe there would be if somebody picked at it. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, we are the harshest critic of our own
That's true.
history. So, uh, after watching this, I got so much out of it. What are you hoping that audiences will pick up and take away from this series?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I would say the biggest thing is I hope that if people watch the series and they haven't read these authors, which is
Mhm.
likely, hopefully, to be the case, that they'll come away from these with books to read and potentially maybe a future new favorite author of theirs. Like I hope that they'll go and they'll read Laird or Mariana or Liz or Paul and fall in love with the books and go out and recommend them to friends. Like I want there to be more readers in the world, basically. Like I want people to go out and read these things because they're great work, they're great writers, they're great works. It's yeah, so I hope people take that away from it. And then on a slightly deeper, or not slightly deeper, slightly other level, I hope that it raises questions for them, for viewers about, like what is human creativity? Where does that come from? Like how much of a person's biography really informs the work that they do, or or questions about the horror genre. Why do we respond to it? Where does it come from? Why do we, and I don't know that the documentary presents answers to those questions, and I don't think that it's intended to. I think it's intended to ask them and to have viewers think about them on their own, you know, based on the answers given in the documentary.
Is there already plans to expand on this on a season two, or do you have a list of authors you would want to try to get for expanding this?
I absolutely want to make another season. Would love to. I have a long list of authors that I would want to talk to. I mean, so many. I would love to expand it and do like First Word on Horror International and go talk to other, writers in other countries. I honestly, my most expansionist impulse is then to do like First Word on Fantasy or First Word on Science Fiction and start to talk to authors of other genres. I mean, I think between you and me, a lot of those genres sort of overlap anyway. But it would still be cool to be like, oh, here now we're just going to talk to people who write science fiction for a season. I think would be so cool. But we put these ones out because we wanted to see if there was an appetite for this. So if people want more, they should watch this first season and
Mhm.
recommend it to friends and get everybody to watch it so that I can justify going off and making making more.
Definitely. And playing off that answer, why horror as your first season?
So that's a great question. I mean, a little bit because of I just happen to know the most horror writers because horror is a genre that I know well. So it was easy for me to ask Laird to come be interviewed. It was easy for me to ask Stephen. But beyond that, I think it's a genre more than science fiction and more than fantasy that has a vehement audience. B, there's just a lot of it in the pop culture zeitgeist right now. Like there's always horror
Mhm.
movies. It's sort of everywhere. So it made it the obvious choice, I think, in terms of like, foregrounding it, asking questions about it, finding people who write it. Like it just sort of made sense.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much for your time. This was definitely very fascinating and informative in a way that I don't think I've seen before. So thank you very
Thank you
much
so
for
much.
this.
I appreciate it. Thank you.